It's January 1972, the third test between Australia and the World 11 in Australia. Sir Donald Bradman, renowned as the greatest batter to ever grace the game, describes a match-winning knock of 254 from Sir Garfield Sobers as the greatest he had ever seen on Australian soil. Sobers was coming up against Dennis Lillee in his prime, who had just picked up 5 wickets in the first innings of the test, dismissing the all-rounder for a duck. Sobers himself said he wasn't too upset with the dismissal because Lillee was bowling like lightning. Still, Garry Sobers strode out in the third innings and took the bowling apart like he was facing a C-grade lineup. He scored a mammoth 254, setting up an unassailable lead that helped the World 11 win the test by 96 runs. Even receiving the highest regards from Sir Don Bradman himself, though, doesn't begin to scratch the surface of Sir Garfield Sobers' greatness. In Cricketers of My Time, author A.A. Thompson quotes, "When Garfield Sobers was making mincemeat of the England 11 at Headingley last year, an elderly neighbour, fuming and fretting with exasperation, addressed me bitterly. 'This isn't fair, they're playing 14 men.' The impact of the all-rounder was impeccable. He was a complete batter, a match winner with the ball, and a game-changer in the field." To get an idea of Sobers' impact at the time, we need to rewind back to the time of his retirement. When the legend retired in 1974, he left Test cricket as the all-time leading run scorer, with 8,032 Test runs, nearly 600 runs clear of the second highest run scorer. He also finished with the 6th highest Test batting average among batters with at least 50 innings at the time, and the second most Test hundreds, only behind Sir Don Bradman. These numbers don't highlight the uncertainty around Sobers' batting position, however. The all-rounder debuted for the West Indies in 1954 at just 17 years of age. Except he wasn't picked as an all-rounder. He was selected as a specialist spin bowler, outlandish in hindsight given he didn't even end up being a spin specialist, with impressive exploits in bowling medium pace as well as both left-arm orthodox and wrist spin. Sobers came into a settled West Indian batting lineup. The iconic 3 Ws from Barbados in Frank Worrell, Everton Weekes, and Clyde Walcott were still at the peak of their powers. The trio were already averaging 64, 62, and 47 respectively, with 20-plus tests to each of their names. This meant numbers 3, 4, and 5 were already settled. In fact, Sobers debuted batting at 9. Even as Sobers progressed in his career, it was Rohan Kanhai who broke into the side, batting at 3. Frequently, Sobers was the experiment in the batting lineup, shuffling up and down the order. The variance in his batting position was particularly high in his early career. In the first test of Australia's tour of West Indies, Sobers batted at 6 and 8 in both innings. The very next test, he opened the batting in both innings. In the last test of the series, he went back to the lower middle order at 7 and 5 in both innings. It wasn't until 1962, 8 years into his prolific career, that he found a more permanent home in the lineup in the middle order, batting between 5 and 6. Despite batting at 8 different batting positions throughout his career, he only averaged below 35 at number 8 and averaged above 50 in 5 of the 8 positions. The innings that characterized Garfield Sobers as a batter was his unbeaten 365 against Pakistan in 1958. Bear in mind, Sobers was just 21 at the time, with a test average of 34. His innings shattered Len Hutton's 20-year record of the highest individual score in a test innings, of 364. Sobers' record stood for another 36 staggering years, until Brian Lara eventually scored the famous 375 against England in 1994. Today, Sobers' innings is still the 6th highest individual score in a test innings. That game against Pakistan began a Hall of Fame purple patch with the bat for Sobers. In 10 innings, he scored 1,115 runs, averaging 185.83 with a staggering 5 hundreds. He was all or nothing in these innings. Every time he made it past 25, he went on to score a massive 100. He was also left unbeaten on 4 of the 5 occasions he scored a century. Sobers scored a total of 1,299 runs that calendar year, the most runs in a single calendar year at the time. Over 20 years of Test cricket, Sobers had 8 years where he averaged above 50 with the bat. Interestingly though, Sobers also had a lot of inconsistent years, with another 8 years averaging below 40 with the bat. Much of this had to do with the test schedule at the time, where Sobers would spend much of a year playing no tests, even at the peak of his powers. In 1967, he played just 1 test, in which he managed to score a 50 in each innings. Sobers, in an era with a more consistent test schedule, may have seen more consistent success reflected in his numbers. On match factor, Sobers batted with an average 47% better while striking 30% quicker than other top 6 batters in his era, from 1954 to 1974. Sir Garfield Sobers was a fine technician with the bat, but it was his big hitting that frequently caught the eye of fans around the world. One of his most famous tales is how in 1968, Sobers played a game for Nottinghamshire against Glamorgan and smashed 6 sixes in an over off Malcolm Nash, becoming the first ever player in first-class history to record the feat. From 1954 to 1974, the West Indies scored 55,000 runs. Garry Sobers himself scored 14.6% of these runs, the single largest contributor to the Windies' runs. He outbatted even top-order specialists like Rohan Kanhai over his career, a testament to Sobers' batsmanship. After becoming the first batter to reach the 8,000-run mark in Tests in 1974, Sobers remains the fourth quickest to 8,000 runs to this day. His record stood for nearly 30 years before Sachin Tendulkar broke it in 2002 with 3 fewer innings. When Sobers debuted, he was picked in the side for his left-arm finger spin. The West Indies themselves, at the time, favoured a spin-dominant bowling attack led by Sonny Ramadan and Alf Valentine. It was an injury to the latter, though, that brought Sobers into the 11 in the first place. His bowling did show promise initially, as he grabbed 4 wickets for 81 in 29.5 overs over both innings in his debut test. In Sobers' first ever over, he dismissed Trevor Bailey, stamping his authority in Test cricket. Incredibly, Sobers' identity as a multi-skill bowler was yet to be established. The world hadn't even seen his ability to swing the ball at pace or bowl wrist spin. Throughout the 1960s, he developed his wrist spin with an especially deceptive wrong-un. The all-rounder only reached his full form with the ball when Frank Worrell saw him bowl some useful medium pace and specifically pushed him to add it as a serious weapon to his arsenal. Even after becoming proficient and effective with 2 types of spin, the team still wanted more from Sobers and saw his potential with pace bowling. Bear in mind, the West Indies were only just developing their pace battery. Wes Hall only debuted in 1958 and Charlie Griffith 2 years later. Sobers was tasked with a lot of heavy lifting across both bowling disciplines. Where do you even compare Sobers as a bowler? He was truly a jack of all trades, handy with pace, swinging it both ways, with left-arm orthodox and with wrist spin. Sobers averaged 15% better per wicket and picked wickets 9% quicker than the spinners in his games. From 1954 to 1974, West Indian bowlers picked up 1,583 wickets. Sobers was the second highest contributor to these wickets, with 235 scalps, only beaten by Lance Gibbs' 276 at this time. Among all his skills, Sobers' raw pace is often forgotten. Barry Richards claimed that, on his day, Garry Sobers, often underrated as a fast man because of his other talents, could be deadly. Garry had a terrifying bouncer, and his left-arm bowling, combined with great variation, often made him unplayable. Sunil Gavaskar, too, described Sobers as a lethal quick bowler who could swing the ball either way. So Sobers was Wasim Akram-esque with his ability to swing the ball, and one of the pioneers of left-arm wrist spin, apart from his primary skill of left-arm orthodox. And all of this is just one aspect of his game. He's easily the most multi-dimensional cricketer the world has ever seen. On top of all this, Sobers was an absolute gun in the field. This is what the Cricket Monthly had to say on Sobers' fielding. In the slips, he made half chances look inevitable. At leg slip, he pouched impossibilities. Posted in the covers, he chased like a greyhound and, in one beat, gathered and released, flat, fast, unerring. With 109 catches in his Test career, he picked the 4th most catches from 1954 to 1974, the 2nd most for a non-wicket keeper, with 16 fewer matches than Colin Cowdrey above him. He also picked 12.4% of all 882 catches taken by West Indians in this time. Outstanding, given he beats out the Windies wicketkeepers who played through this era. One of Sobers' great fielding anecdotes comes from the 1963-64 Sheffield Shield season. Fielding at leg slip in a game for South Australia, he anticipated a run-out chance and got to the stumps to break them himself before even the square leg umpire could move into the position to declare the wicket. The wicketkeeper at the time, Barry Jarman, remarked, "You've done everything else in this game, now you want to umpire." Sir Garfield Sobers was also part of Test cricket's first ever tied game. In December 1960, the West Indies faced Australia in Frank Worrell's first ever Test as captain. The Windies collapsed to a shaky 65 for 3 in the first innings, before Sobers piled on an invaluable 132 in just 174 minutes, enabling an innings total of 453. At the time, it was regarded as one of the fastest individual innings in Australia. The Aussies replied with 505 in the second innings, having a lead of 52 runs. Sobers was able to pick up 2 wickets here. The game peaked when Australia had to chase 233 for the win in the 4th innings, with the finish coming down to Wes Hall bowling the final over. Joe Solomon from square leg ran out Ian Meckiff with a direct hit, leaving Australia stranded at 232. The game ended in an agonizing standstill, both teams bundled out for the exact same runs, as we saw the first ever tie in Test cricket. To this day, Sir Garfield Sobers has the 5th best batting average among Test batters with at least 50 innings. He also remains the 4th highest Test run scorer for the West Indies, and is still the 4th fastest batter to 8,000 Test runs. With the ball, Sobers retired as the 2nd highest wicket-taker for the West Indies, only behind Lance Gibbs. Today, he's got the 8th most wickets for the Windies. Among a select 15 of Test cricket's finest all-rounders, Garry Sobers had the best net average, which is the batting average minus bowling average, at 23.74. Sobers and the second-placed Callis clear third-placed Imran Khan by a mile, with Callis beating out Imran by a score of nearly 8. Much of this is due to the fact that Callis, and to some extent Sobers, played in an era that favored batting, with docile pitches around the world. However, the quality of bowling in both those eras was immaculate, and the two were amazing with both ball and bat. To this day, only 2 all-rounders have scored 8,000 Test runs and picked up 200-plus Test wickets, Sir Garry Sobers and Jacques Kallis. In 1966, Garry Sobers became the first player to have completed the double of scoring 100 and picking up an innings fifer in a Test match 2 times in a career. Only Ian Botham and Ravichandran Ashwin have achieved this feat more times, with 5 and 4 times respectively. As someone who never got to watch the legend play, it is unimaginable to think of a player so dominant with both ball and bat. Garfield Sobers was a gift to the cricketing world. For as long as cricket lives, Garfield Sobers will live in fond memories and in stories passed down generations, for he was truly one of a kind.